either Ranjana or me before I start? I can see Prashant Chaturvedi and then somebody called, like you've raised your hand because you want to say something.
Hello, Mr. Prashant.
And
Mr.
then
Dhrubashish, do you have any query?
Question is actually you have identified, you have actually set one more MS Team session, and then few students are actually waiting there, few participants. Initially I was there, but then later on I have seen that it's a continuation of the previous, so I have joined there.
Okay.
So it's a honest request, if any of from the organizer, if can go there, log in and can tell them, because that is the link you have created for session 2. That is the reason maybe 22 to 25 participants are already logged in there.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you very much for informing this. Ma'am, you continue. We'll take care of that.
All right. So I'm assuming the other people put up their hands for the same thing. And if there is somebody who has any other question during the conversation, please do use the chat window and put in your question. And I'm sure somebody can, sort of have a look at it, or towards the end of the session, I can take a look at it. So while we are talking, let me just, okay, so Ranjana, you'll have to make me a presenter so that I can share my screen. If there's anybody from the IT team here.
IT team, please. Mr. Abhinav.
In the meantime, maybe I can start talking so that
I'm trying, ma'am. Right.
All right. Yeah. So, this whole, give me a little bit of background, and in terms of the people who are attending this session, are you all from an engineering background, or is it a mix of engineering and students from other disciplines? If somebody can.
Ma'am, it is a mix of participants. We have most of the faculties, but few students of masters and research also.
Okay. So mostly
but
faculty,
with different
right?
backgrounds, because data science is applied to all the fields, so we have participants from mixed backgrounds.
Okay, that really helps. Thank you so much. So good afternoon. Yes, please.
I just wanted to say this. I'm a finance background person, so I'm a faculty in one of the management institutes. So basically, I'm associated. I've been using computers, but I am not, computer. I do not know the technologies of computer at all. But I believe that data science will be essential for the future. So therefore, I wanted to increase my awareness. That's why I have joined this program.
Okay, wonderful. So let me just share my screen now that I have the right to do so. And what I'll do is I will probably talk through the slides which are most generic and hopefully can really answer the question for everyone in terms of what data science is, what machine learning is, what AI is, and how it can benefit. And in this context, I would just ask people who are really experts in AI or ML to bear with me because we will not be going deep into this conversation looking at the nature of the audience in general. But I'm sure Ranjana has other topics which are more deeper dives that are planned as we move forward, right? So just give me a second. I'm trying to share my screen. Yeah. Can you see my screen? I'm hoping all of you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see.
All right. So at a very high level, right, even before we come to data science, ML and AI, what is the context of data, right? How do we use data in our, when we are dealing with, solving any problem using a computer, what is the role of data, right? So I think, let's say even if you look at the computer that is in the human computer or the human brain, how does that brain deal with data? So what happens is that when we look at, when we take any decision, right, when our brain takes any decision, it does so based on the knowledge that is already acquired by the human being. And so let's assume there's a database in our head, which is a summary of the experiences that we've had, and any decision making that is happening on top of that, it uses to a certain extent the data from the past. So for example, a small child may look at a fire and put his or her hand onto it, and then once they realize that this is something that burns, that becomes a part of their database, and they, next time they're near a fire, they know exactly how to react to it. Okay? That's a very, very simplistic, very, very basic example. But so this is how data gets used in decision making, right? Historical data has a role to play in decision making. Now you could say that, yes, it is easy to understand how historical data has a role to play in decision making for a human being. Why should this always be relevant, let's say, for an industry or an organization, right? Now, let's say we are talking about, let me take a concrete example, and let's say we are talking about production in a production capability or capacity in an assembly line of certain manufacturing that is going on. Now, when you look at an assembly line, let's say you ask an individual who is in charge of that assembly line and gives the data for how much capacity this machine has and what is the kind of production that is going to happen in the next few weeks or next month, for example. So this person will basically not conjure up a number, but he or she will look back, look at the capacity of the machine, understand that when that machine is actually used, what are the other factors that come into play, in terms of how the shifts are working, how much wear and tear happens with the machinery, what is the downtime in a certain time period. Look at all of those factors and then make a prediction of, hey, in the next month, this is the production volume that we will be able to manage. Now, when you look at all the parameters that this particular individual has examined, these are all parameters from past data. So this is how data is an intrinsic part of everything that we do and every decision making that we do, right? We may not know about data science, right? If you don't know the subject, then first thing you have to understand is that you're already doing data science to some extent because your brain is actually using the past data in your day-to-day life as a specialist or a generalist in any job. You're relying on past data to take decisions about the future, to make predictions about the future, to make commitments about the future, and so on and so forth. So at a very basic level, that is what data is all about, right? How do we use data? Now, if you want to look at the more scientific definition and differentiation between data science, ML, and AI, and I think it is important at this point in time to talk about data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence in a separate context, because when you talk to people who are dealing with data in some form or the other, very often you will see people use ML and AI interchangeably. Sometimes somebody who says they are a data science expert, somebody who's working in machine learning will say they are a data science expert. The thing is that while all of these disciplines actually deal with data and are focused on utilizing data to do some decision making, right? But there is a very fundamental difference between data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So data science, for example, is a concept which is the first level concept that unifies statistics, data analysis, and the methods that are associated with it. So all these things that I just described to you about how human beings take decision, how somebody in a production line forecasting production for the next month would take, or next 6 months takes a decision, all of that analysis and how it is done, and how do you do more advanced predictions, how do you use statistics for doing those predictions, all of that, the discipline that has been created to put all of that together and give it a very structured format is called data science. And all of this data analysis is done to understand and analyze actual phenomena, right? That's the definition from Shikio Hayashi, right? I mean, and this is the most prominent definition that is being used for explaining what data science is all about. Machine learning, now let's come to the second aspect. Now, machine learning also deals with data. It also deals with studying data to, do something out of it. But the learning part of it is important. So it is a field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. This is what a definition given by Arthur Samuel, and this is a definition which is pretty standard. Now, you could argue, you might have this question in your mind that what is the difference between the ability to learn versus being explicitly programmed? So for example, I could write a piece of code which says, if this, then do that. So if you find that the data has these elements, if the data shows these aspects, then take this action, stop the production line. If this data has certain other characteristics, then create a report. Now, if an if then kind of a statement put by me explicitly into a program is when I'm actually deciding what action, what is the way to interpret that data, right? That you can do, right? That's not machine learning. Machine learning is when I feed a lot of data to the computer, and I may also, as a human being, not fully understand what are the various aspects of that data, and we train the computer to actually, or the program to actually sieve through all of this data, and through some guided or non-guided mechanisms, actually infer some learning out of that data. That is called machine learning. Now, in order to demystify this a little bit further, let us take the example of, again, a small child, right? So there are a lot of things that a child is not explicitly told. A human child, if you look at a human child, there are a lot of things that parents don't explicitly teach, but the kids just pick up from the environment. They watch others and they learn, right? And so that capacity, that cognitive capacity to learn something, a smaller attempt to try and do that for machines is called machine learning. So again, very similar to data science, you're dealing with data, but here it is more about a computer program actually trying to learn on its own, guided by, on the basis of some guiding parameters already defined by human beings. Now we come to the next term, which is artificial intelligence, right? And, machine learning and artificial intelligence are related, right? Unless you have machine learning, you cannot aim for artificial intelligence. So unless you have a system which has the capacity to self-learn, you cannot really produce artificial intelligence. But you may have strong machine learning capabilities in a program, and that program may not be an artificial intelligence program, right? Because for being an AI program, what you need additionally is that mimicking of the cognitive functions that humans associate with the human mind. So one is learning, and learning may be happening through machine learning. But then the other core aspect of AI is problem solving. So how does that data, which is, there is a certain data which is used for learning something, and then that learning is applied to problem solving. So this process of learning, and then from that learning applying to problem solving, is what is a full cycle of cognitive functions that a human being displays. So when we have AI systems which can start doing some of that, when we have systems which do both these iterations, we call them AI systems. So that's a very basic difference in the definitions of these three topics. And the process, statistics, data science, I will not go into too much detail. This is about statistical analysis. So for example, I may look at, let's say, let's look at weather data, right? And we look at the way seasons are changing. Now, if there's a lot of environmental data from a particular region in a particular city, and from that place, you take the data for the last 10 years, right? and you look at that data and you feed it to a linear regression algorithm, which is one of the data science algorithms, and you build a model out of that, that particular data actually may give you some insights into the cyclic behavior of the weather changes through the years, right, with some anomalies and stuff like that. So doing that kind of analysis on your own by using these statistical measures, that would be a good example of data science. When it comes to machine learning, the way you will deal with this data is that you gather and prepare this data, then use that same data to train a machine, train an algorithm, or what is we call as a model, and let the model learn the same fact. So for the same example, the model would learn on its own that there is a cyclic pattern to the data. This means that you have the 4 seasons, right? You have summer followed by in India, if you look at it, you'll have summer followed by like the rainy season, followed by the winter, and then you have spring again and summer and so on, right? So that cyclicity, the model should learn on its own by looking, by going through the data. So the model gets trained and then you apply the model. So how do you apply the model? Is that you actually feed in data and say, hey, what is the likely range of temperatures for Hyderabad in March, right? 2021, based on past data, right? So the model may come up with certain recommendations which may be getting derived from past data. So this is how the machine learning process works. So basics of machine learning, if you go, basically it's not completely raw data that is fed to programs, but you have in certain cases labeled data which is labeled by humans. The data is of a certain kind, and you explain what are the parameters of the data that are important to be looked at. So for example, if you have a lot of weather data, you will say temperature is important, the pressure, humidity, wind direction, wind speed. You might look at certain number of parameters that are labeled in a certain manner, and the training database is set up for the machine learning algorithm. And then and you may also have unlabeled examples, in which case you have a mechanism for classifying, doing some classification on the data. And sometimes if there are labeled examples, your machine learning algorithm will come up with classifications. And then you may have other aspects that you build into your program, which could be rules-based models and stuff like that. And then predictions are made, based on all the data gathering and analysis and the learning that the system or program does. At a very high level, coming back to the same point, data provides insights to us. Let's say if you're looking at a system performance, what is contributing to system performance or degradation, and what contributes to customer satisfaction with the product, right? Like if you're working in the industry and you're looking at a particular product, and you get to know that the customer is very satisfied, what you really want to know is, why is the customer satisfied? What are those things in the product that I want to continue to, so that satisfaction can continue, and how can I make those things better so that customer satisfaction improves? Data also empowers us to make intelligent decisions, right? Which are related to different businesses, different business decisions that we may want to do associated with the product or not. Now within AI also, there's a little bit of hierarchy which is there. And what is the hierarchy? You could have very simple things like counting, reporting, and dashboards, right? Looking at a particular data set, analyzing it, and so instrumentation and feedback, let's say from some sensors, etc., some metrics and KPIs, all of that dashboard representation is very descriptive. Data mining and modeling, again, I talked about linear regression, and I talked about hypothesis creation and analysis. Doing all of that is all part of a descriptive series of AI. And once you start doing clustering and classification and experiment, and you start moving towards experimentation, you're actually, sort of creating much more advanced machine learning models, and you start getting into the predictive stage, right? Like you look at the past data, there's a learning associated with it, and then you project that data to make certain predictions in the future, right? And then, of course, when a system is able to learn and optimize and reach its own conclusions, right? So, for example, all those gaming AI systems that we are talking about, right, which are based on deep learning models or neural nets, and are able to, sort of take very independent decisions on what should the next step be in a game, which is a very complex environment, right? And start working, start making those advanced prescriptions on what should be the next step. That is when you start getting a higher level of artificial intelligence. This is a slide more suitable for somebody who's already studying AI, so I will skip it for now. I want to talk about something which is very, very pertinent today. So when we look at data science and machine learning and artificial intelligence, as far as where we are talking about data science, where we are looking at statistics to achieve, to derive some analysis from a certain amount of data. And then as we move to ML, we start training a computer, and then we start giving decision-making powers to it as we move towards AI. Now, one very interesting thing and very important thing that happens as we move on this cycle is that any biases that we carry as human beings, right, they start reflecting in the data. And if they are reflected in the data, or the data is skewed in any manner, then the computer or the program that gets trained, it also gets trained on that same bias or the same skewness of data, right? I'll give you an example of skewness of data. Let's say in the previous decade, like I remember when I did my engineering from IIT Roorkee, and it was in the early 90s, late 80s actually. I passed out in early 90s, right? So when I joined the class, initially I was the only girl in the class, right? Now, if the data of that class was taken up, and for several years before that, if the data was picked up, the data would show that in a class of around 70, there were maybe 1 or 2 girls in every year, right, for electronics and communication and computer science. Now, if somebody was to use this data to infer that whether more women were qualified for, so one of the things that people say is, smarter people get through better institutes or whatever, wherever there is a competition, smarter people make through, right? But without understanding the social background at that time, if that data was used to derive whether men are smarter than women, then this data might imply that 1% of women make it, less than 1% make it to electronics and communication, and therefore women are less smarter than men, which we all know is an erroneous. I hope we all know that it's an erroneous conclusion. I mean, both men and women can be equally smart. So I think this is the kind of bias that can exist in data. And since human beings have very, our cognitive services are capabilities are very, very advanced. We can infer, we can derive, we can look at this data and say, oh, but the social situation was different, right? And there are so many complex parameters that go in us making that inference. But a computer is something that is trained, right? A program is something that is trained. It will only be trained based on what you have fed to the computer. So unless you also make social some sort of an inference on the social situation in a particular era and feed that data to the computer, the data is likely to be misinterpreted in this case. So I think this is something very important to remember. Another, before I talk about that slide, let me share another example with you. So I think there was once, this is a very oft talked about example, in the early stages of AI, there was this, there were people who went to, I mean, if you go to public restrooms, right, you will see that you will have that hand dryer, which blows out air and you can put your hand under it and dry your hands. So there was a new set of dryers that were developed once, which was, using some sort of a image recognition technology to, sort of kick off the air. So what happened is somebody with a dark skin tone actually realized that the dryer would not work with their hands. And later, when the code was examined, it was found that the system had been trained on all white or very fair-skinned people. So the system did not even classify or recognize that there was a hand there, right? The image was discarded. So these are the kind of things. So inherently, it's a computational mistake that has happened. But what is the impact? The impact is that somebody with a dark skin tone actually cannot use that product, which is which has several consequences for the product itself, because a large section of population is not going to be able to use the product, and the product will fail. But try to extrapolate this and see that there could be so many scenarios where actual injustice may happen based on computers actually, or an AI program because the AI program may have the same bias as you have as an individual, or the way the data has been fed to the program. So I think one of the things that all people who are working in AI and machine learning today have to understand is that we have to work on responsible AI. When we work on artificial intelligence, right from the first go, we understand that there is a responsibility in developing AI systems. And it's even more important today because the rate of progress is very high. In 2016, object recognition was done by a computer program which was equivalent to how human beings could identify objects. In 2017, speech recognition, as much as you could understand speech and note it, a computer could. Reading comprehension, human parity in 2018. Speech synthesis, machine translation, human parity. In 2019, general language understanding, human parity, right? These look like very remarkable breakthroughs, and they are. We still, there's still a long way to go, right, for something called a general purpose artificial intelligence. But in very specialized domains, there's a lot of progress that has happened in this field of artificial intelligence. Now, as we move forward, any biases that we build into these systems, knowingly or unknowingly, will have an impact on human life and society, right? So I think this is just to make the cause, talk about, why responsible AI is important. Now, nearly 9 in 10 organizations across countries have encountered ethical issues resulting from the use of AI. And, in the last 2-3 years, percentage of executives who have answered this question saying that have the below issues resulting from the use and implementation of AI been brought to your attention, right? And this is a report from Capgemini, and literally you're looking at 90%, 85% plus answers here. So everybody has seen some impact of implementation of such systems, right? So there is a real danger of human rights violation. For example, facial recognition technology. Within Microsoft, we have very, very strict principles that we've established. We've even said no to projects, where we felt that facial recognition may end up being used in a manner which is not in the interest of people. We've actually said no to projects like that. And at the same time, every time we do coding within Microsoft, we each of the teams has to follow a list of principles that we've set for ourselves. And then those programs are actually audited against those to make sure that whatever we are developing in the AI domain is responsible AI, right? So I think something we take very seriously. And we believe that anybody who's working on artificial intelligence, you start with machine learning, start dealing with data, you have to understand what is the implication of data and how computers use that data, right? So that we can all, work on this. Of course, this is Brad Smith, Microsoft President and Chief Legal Officer, and he, I think the book Tools and Weapons, pretty interesting. It talks about how technology can be used as a weapon as much as it is a tool for human betterment. So I think keeping that in mind. Now, today's debate around AI is a lot about facial recognition, a lot of conversations about fairness. So what is the corporate responsibility behind it? Deep fakes. I mean, you've all heard of fake news, right? So see the kind of harm that fake news can do. How do you identify deep fakes? What are deep fakes? Deep fakes is when there's a complete video made for a person using machine learning. Whereas that video shows that so-and-so is actually saying those things, but actually that person has never got himself videotaped saying those things, right? And those are deep fakes, and it is possible for programs to do that. And you see a lot of fake news dissemination that happens. So all of these things, I think, become important. Of course, there is policy work. You heard, I think, recently in one of the AI-related summits, I think Mr. Modi also talked about the fact that there is a need for compliance more to be followed around these areas and policies to be formulated. And I think Government of India is also looking at this. So I think regulations need to be there for how AI systems have to develop for the benefit of humans and without bringing in any of these biases. Now, there are 4 or 5 things to think about if you go deeper into this subject. Is every system that is developed should be accountable. It should be transparent, it should be fair, it should be reliable, and it should be safe. It should provide privacy and security, and it should be inclusive. I will make this my last slide given the interest of time, and let me go through this in detail. So what is accountability? Accountability is that there's an action taken and accountability can be assigned. If you write systems and programs in a manner where you do not know where things have gone wrong, that's a non-accountable system. An accountable system where at every step, as we are inferring something in the program, we are able to, through logging, through data analysis, we are able to understand and establish accountability. Why is this important? It is important because when you do deep learning in machine learning, deep learning algorithms, very often the results are very clear, but we do not know exactly how the results are achieved, right? The whole algorithm of those results is not known because neural nets are created, data is fed in. There may be multiple layers of neural networks, and you have data as an input and you have a certain output. Unfortunately, we use this, but we do not know every step what is happening inside. So there are other measures of creating accountability when deep learning algorithms are being used. So it is important that people who are developing these systems, who are using these systems, understand how accountability is established. The second is transparency, right? So the system is transparent. You understand that every step there is documentation on what is going to happen, why is it happening, what is the kind of data that is being fed into it, and there is enough analysis of that data to make sure that it is inclusive. Hey, this is the data which we used to do certain analysis. Did we include all kinds of data? Like in that example for the hand dryer, did we include people with different skin tones? Did we include people who have brown complexion, white complexion, slightly pinkish complexion, whatever, all kinds of scenarios have they been included. Only then the system is inclusive. how is privacy and security being maintained, right? So deep learning system, so let's say an ML system or an AI system which is monitoring on an airport all, you know, different people who are coming in for security. Does the system, is the system secure enough so that the privacy of the individual is maintained? Should not be that somebody else can hack into the system, figure out, oh, you know, and target individuals because they now know the itinerary, they know where the person is going, and they can track that person, right? So those kind of things. Reliability and safety. System should be reliable, right? It should be very well tested. It should actually give you results which are conclusive and not arbitrary in nature. And of course, fairness, sense of fairness. Like, for example, the example that I gave you about inferring that women are less intelligent than men based on data which is not a fair assessment of the situation is, you know, so how do we sort of look at those kind of biases and address it in the system? And principles are great to have, but converting them into practice is something which is which includes a lot of efforts. You know, there have to be regulations. It has to be, every program has to be coded thoughtfully. People who are from the business side, when you become in charge, if you are in charge of, let's say, a business, how do you ask the right questions to the people who are developing these systems so that you ensure that these systems are all encompassing, inclusive, are you know, protecting the privacy of individuals and so on and so forth. So I think that's the whole summary I wanted to, you know, sort of address, and I'll take a pause here. I would love to take questions from all of you. And then we can discuss a little bit more.
Participants, in case you have any query, you are welcome to raise your queries and clarify your doubts.
Tina ma'am, this is Vikas.
Yes.
I have one or two queries actually.
Sure.
My first query is if we talk about the data is with us since the decades. Like earlier, we have the data. If I take an example of banking domain, then the ATM, whatever the transactions is happening, that is a kind of data, right? We have the telecom system where the calls has been generated. That is a kind of data. So earlier we also have the data. Now we also have the similar kind of data.
Right.
So in terms of the implementation or the extraction or ETL tool point of view, what is the significant difference between earlier data and implementation and the current after coming the AI and machine learning? Point number one. Point number two is, since we also at the when we were having small systems like Java, we do have the mechanism to implement the things so that the system can easily read the data and analyze the same thing, because whatever the computer will do, whatever we will ask him to, or ask him to do it, right? So earlier also we have the same kind of implementation, and now after coming to ML and AI, the same thing is happening. So what is the significant difference between the two systems as well?
So, okay, let me, those are very good questions, Vikas. Thank you for asking them. One of the reasons I like to push for more Q&A is because me just speaking in a monologue doesn't explain things as well. But somebody asks a question like the one you asked, it gives me an opportunity to explain better. Okay. So first of all, thank you for the question. Now for the first question, in terms of that we had data earlier and we have data today as well. You took the example of banking sector. Now let's look at what happens in the banking sector. The data that you're talking about is financial data over there. And most of the usage of that data earlier in the systems was around, hey, I have an account. So I have my account data. Now, if I make a transaction which is associated with this account, that data will be, the past data will be used to determine if I'm the right person. Then there'll be a transaction made which will reflect in the GLs, which is the general ledger. It is, India has double entry bookkeeping, so it will have two entries. One is within my account and one is in the GL of the right GL at the bank level. Okay, And then the data, now, if you examine these actions that the program is taking, it is taking very preset rule-based actions. So in a banking, transactional decision making and actions are based on rule-based environment. Now let's look at a very different aspect of banking. So this aspect of banking is the same as it was then in the past and is the same today, because this is needed, very much needed. You don't want to do any additional value addition here. You want to follow certain banking practices and principles. So this is clear. Now, one of the things, if you want to look at how trading happens, right? Now, when you do trading, stock trading, the stock trading is a lot about decision making. So people who trade stocks, and if you're not trading, you're not buying stock and keeping it for the long term, but you want to benefit from the market based on the daily changes that might be happening in the market, then you have to consider a lot of parameters. You have to see, oh, today market started low, and maybe it is an opportunity for me to buy the right stocks. I'm more interested in the tech sector and the, let's say, oil and gas sector or solar sector, and I look at those stocks, some of them are going down, you may go ahead and buy, right? But so in the past, you would have, there was a time long in the past where you would take all those decisions yourself as a human being. Then in the intermediate past, there were systems which would give you a good analysis of the past data, and they would show a trend. They they show a trend of how the stock is trading. Maybe some data about the company, could be financial data, would become known to you through the system. Now, what is this program doing? It is actually using the data and learning certain inferences from the data and presenting it to you. Now you fast forward to today, then you have advanced trading algorithms, which not only do this analysis, data analysis, they make decisions on your behalf and they buy that share. And then because you actually make money, right? And the human brain cannot react at that fast rate. And if that program is not programmed well, you may lose money also, right? I mean, all of that stuff has been happening for a while. So this is the essential difference of how data usage has progressed. And the reason why that was such an excellent question is because it actually shows the progression from, just a human cognition to data science to machine learning to AI systems, right? Which are doing algorithmic trading today in the market.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thank you very much. Thanks.
And you had another question, which was around. Could you repeat that? Sorry, I missed the second question.
No, this one is the second one is also answered in the similar manner.
All
Actually,
right.
I got that. So, ma'am, I do have one more. I'm sorry to answer. I'm raise another question. So, in terms of the implementation point of view, we have the AI as well as ML. So, AI is more towards the logic that we are going to implement. So, machine learning is what the system can learn by analyzing the data and take necessary action. But for taking the necessary action, the system should be well aware through the analytics or through the programs that we can develop for the machine learning. Am I right?
Yeah, so AI is a combination of usage of machine learning plus a lot of other things for the system to take decision on its own. So machine learning is just the learning aspect, but everything else after the learning to actually be able to prescribe or predict, etc., could be a combination. For program for understanding when servers are going to fail in my data center environment, right? Now, if I have to write that program, maybe some of it will be machine learning, but then I will use certain aspects of intervention in the program, which I want to keep for analysis by the humans who are administrators and have large experience. Before I feed that data into the model, then maybe I'm adding an extra layer here. So the combination of all of that could be an AI system.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much, ma'am.
All right.
Madam, I have got one question, which is,
yes.
After listening to Mr. Vikas and yourself and the answers, I got some, some understanding, little understanding there. But in order for me to understand a little more, when you're saying machine learning, one of the steps is training the model. So when you're training the model for the machine to understand, can I get a glimpse of how do you train that model? Are you adding algorithms? Are you writing programs? Is it a combination of different programs and algorithms? So how is it done?
So very excellent question. Again, I think it gives me the opportunity to go a little deeper.
Yeah.
So training the model can mean something very simple to very complex. And let me first talk about the simple end of the spectrum.
Right.
So let's say there is like the weather example that I took, like the weather algorithm, right? The data that is there associated with weather. Now, training the model in such an example means that I feed this data to a model, right? Which I believe is the right model for this data. Okay. So what could be the right model? So this is, I'm not a weather expert, and I know that this is not the right model, but somewhere there would be linear regression algorithm, which would be, linear regression is which actually allows you, it's a algorithm which allows you to model the past behavior, right, and infer something in the future, right? So what is this algorithm? Basically, it is a mathematical statistical function, right, and that statistical function has an equation associated with it.
Right.
Now, to this equation, if I give all of this data, most of these statistical equations, they are about probability, right? And statistical equations, many of them are, what is the right mathematical term? But they do not always give precise results, right? Like, for example, the representation of a summation for something from 0 to infinity is a never-ending kind of a equation, which is, you can keep expanding forever, but then you do an approximation by setting limits to it, right?
Absolutely.
So in this state, when we give a certain fixed value of data spread over last several years, let's say in this case, and feed it to these equations, it gives you a curve, right? Now it tells you what the initial parameters look like, what are the characteristics of this curve. Now, if I extrapolate that curve, so that is called, so I actually did it, I said it wrongly. When you fit this data, fitting the model is about taking that data and understanding what model will fit in. That is called training the model. Right. Sorry for that. So what happens is, if I look at this data and I try to do a curve fitting on it, I will get a mathematical equation which is closest to this curve, right? Now, once I have an equation, I can use that equation to determine an output given a new set of data. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So which means, and these will be called as algorithms, right? Yeah. So mathematical equations.
Ma'am, does these algorithms come under supervised learning process? Because the data is calculable and it is predefined, whether at an organization or we can generate that result. So, ma'am, does these algorithms come under supervised learning model?
So yeah, so you're jumping 10 steps and going to the next stage. Before I come to that, Ritik, let me answer this question completely. So what I think what Tapas asked for is about how does the model get trained, or how do you infer correlation between data and what the algorithm is going to be all about. And I gave a very, very simplistic example of how you do it in statistics. The example that I gave you is something that if you were just a data scientist, you would still do this same, right? You will do curve fitting. You will try and figure out how this data matches into a single curve. That's the simplest example. Now, if the data is complex, Your data representation may not match into a simple curve, but you may need to address this data and the variation within it for it to be matching to different parameters could map to different curves because the data is complex in some way. So you would possibly classify the data in certain form and you can actually map it to 2 or 3 different curves. Anything that you call a curve or an equation on the mathematics side could become the basis of an algorithm on the computer science side, right? That we all know. So therefore, taking that data and now once we have this, if you're a data scientist, you will do this curve fitting on your own, and you will use some of the tools available which automatically do curve fitting and so on. Right. But if you are a machine, if you want to train a machine to do this, you would expect the machine to do some of this interpretation on its own, based on some systems that you build based on the past knowledge, blah, 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 and then certain models that are used in the past for training data, right? Now, the question that Ritik, you asked is, you actually didn't ask, you started talking about classified and supervised learning and unsupervised learning, right? So supervised learning is where you act.
Ma'am, I asked, ma'am, I inferred this thought because the data which the sir is talking about is calculable, and it is also ma'am, it is already there with an organization, so we can use that data to make predictions and generate a graph and models. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so yeah, that makes sense. Yes. Any other questions?
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
All right.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Sure, Ritik, go ahead.
Ma'am, data science introduce different kinds of jobs and work jobs, ma'am, basically like data engineering. So how much what are the what all courses or what all the ma'am, how much learning is required for each and every aspect? That is my question, ma'am. Like data scientist and data analyst, data engineer, they are all 3 different categories of job given by data science. So
do
we require to? Yes, ma'am.
So I think basics of data and basics of statistics is important for everybody to understand. If you are looking at any of these, right? That's my personal opinion. But if you look at the role of a data scientist versus that of a machine learning programmer, the focus is completely different. The data scientist is very concerned with understanding the nature of the data and understanding what this can be inferred from this data and how do you look at the statistical techniques which can help you make more sense of that data, right? So data science will typically also be a statistical, scientist will also be a statistical expert. In fact, I know a lot of data scientists who are not experts in programming. So the expectation from data scientists is for them to be scientists of data, but not necessarily programmers or great algorithm creators and stuff like that. If you learning programmers or people who work on the machine learning side, they are people who can take all these existing statistical analysis, etc., that a data scientist may have done and convert these into programs which are efficient, which can deal with the data, which can give output, put in other logic over there which may be required for taking certain kind of actions which are related to the domain. For example, a trading program needs to take certain kind of actions, whereas a monitoring program in a data center needs to shut down some machines or send out an alert or whatever. All of that, building it together is, ML and AI, I think that requires a more stronger programming mindset, and mindset and so on, right? So there is one essential difference that is there like that. Now, even when we look at pure data, there are several aspects to data. The fact that if you have biased data and you feed that into a program, you get a biased output, right? Now, in the same way, if you feed wrong data to a program, you will get wrong output. And where are we collecting the data from? Whether the data has been understood correctly, how has the data been collected? Where is it being collected from? Is it clean data or is it messed up data? How is data privacy being maintained? Who does the data belong to? What are the rules and regulations by which this data is governed? What is the nature of the data? For example, the data that is associated with healthcare. There are rules for how long. In the US, there are very specific rules on how long the data needs to be retained in the system. Today, if you look at privacy and governments are very sensitive to the data from their region, right? There are certain countries who have very specific laws for how data needs to be governed. So, for example, if there is any data which is in Russia, which is related to Russian citizens, right? That data cannot be stored by you in a data center in the US or in India or XYZ location. It has to be in Russia. That's the Russia, the data privacy laws from Russia. European Union has their own data privacy laws, right? So there are people who are just data privacy experts. They know everything that is to know about data privacy. They understand the laws across. These people actually come from a very different background. Some of them have legal backgrounds. Some of them actually start their job as careers as maybe data scientists and then get into that space. So this path is, there are so many different sub-professions within all of these areas that for people who are starting off, like my message to students is that you get in, initially nobody should start with specialization. You should start with getting a stronger understanding of what data is all about and how do you deal with data. Take up a program which actually includes a combination of all these skills. And then as you understand a bit about each of these areas, you may choose to become a data scientist, then do a program which is completely focused on making you a data scientist. And then even if you become a data scientist and join a company, anybody can learn coding. Maybe 5 years later, you feel कि अब बहुत हो गया, now I want to actually do some machine learning. So you actually, in the meantime, do some courses online and train yourself for coding and start doing machine learning. A lot of people actually shift their focus from one area to another over the course of their careers. Does that answer your question to some extent, Ritik? Or if you had any other specific questions, please ask those. It's an important topic that we're discussing here.
Yes, ma'am. I am still learning what data science is, and so, ma'am, the basic question that was, what is the difference between data engineer and an analyst, ma'am? Ma'am, you answered it quite well. Thank you.
So data analyst, or let me go a little deeper into that. A data analyst will be somebody who will be more concerned with the functional nature of the data, whereas the data engineer will be more concerned with how to treat that data. So for example, a data analyst may have to have domain knowledge in many cases, because financial data or environmental data or let's say data from oceans or space data, they all have a very strong functional aspect to it. So typically when a data analyst is brought into the picture, it is somebody from the domain.
Actually, it comes from the DSS part, actually, decision support system. Like the analyst is more towards the decision makers. However, the engineers are more towards the implementation of to get the output based on the decisions or whatever the decisions has been taken.
Yes. And so what does that, so what you're saying is the same thing, right? And what it really means is that you need domain experience. You cannot make decisions for, let's say, astronomical data unless you understand astronomy. Whereas a data engineer will be somebody who will take those inputs and sort of do some calculations, do some programming, some algorithmic, maybe do some, so those kind of things. So you're saying the same thing, but yeah, I just wanted to explain it from a business concept perspective.
So, madam, data analysts will be from different function specific. Is that right?
I mean, it depends. See, when it depends. If your IT industry also has a lot of variations, right? Let's say if you look at a product company like Microsoft. Let's say if we are looking at industry vertical solutions and how our product deals with a certain vertical solution, and because it is a product investment, you may actually want to hire a data analyst for the product in a specific section for a longer duration, right? So which is means a very specialized person for, let's say, financial industry, right? Financial expert. Right. On the other hand, if you're a services company like a Infosys or a TCS or a Wipro, again, they may have an interest in having let's say a data analyst who's an industry specific vertical person who keeps working on different assignments associated with that. So today he'll go and consult in one project, and then after the data engineering team takes over, he's required occasionally and will actually work with other companies, others problems with their customers and so on and so forth, right? So it depends on how specialized the work is. On the other hand, let's say if you look at today, all the space data that is being analyzed by a lot of institutes around the world, where they are trying to run some AI programs on some of the data that they are capturing with what is called the Earth-sized telescope, right? They have multiple telescopes across the world and they are capturing all this data. So all of there, they would, the meaning suddenly changes. They have actual researchers who are your data analysts.
Right.
People who are very deep into astronomy. Yeah.
So Tapasji, one thing is like we also earlier also we have the analyst and in the form of who is analyzing the data, but now the horizon and the implementation has expanded to its larger context. So the new terminology has come up actually, because earlier also we were doing the coding part based on some whatever the technology that point of time we are having. Now the the horizon of the has expanded to its larger context. So we have the main algorithms in place through which the data analytics part can be done in a faster manner, and the visibility of that data can be extended to a larger audience, so that the output or whatever is required can be extracted in a faster manner. Such as an example of marketing team. How marketing team can make the products? They can make the products based on the data that is processed by the system, which is developed by the engineers themselves based on the input from the team actually.
Correct. So it would be industry specific, and it would be also at some points of time it would be function specific.
Yes, it could be. And this is depending on where you are asking this question. I mean, today, if you look at job postings, you might find data analyst job postings where all they want the person to do is to do create some sort of data cleansing work, right? So,
Absolutely.
so there is a pure definition and there is the way how industry is using it. If you're looking at a small company posting that for a data analyst, that person may actually end up doing a lot of things with the data, right? And that role may not be so pure or so focused on one aspect only, right?
Correct. Understood. Thank you, madam.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Vikas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
I think we are at 1:15. I don't want to introduce any new topic at this, any additional slides. So is there any other questions that are there? I can address those, otherwise we can leave early.
Any other query, participants? You may ask. I think you have answered all the questions in whatever you discussed just now. You have handled the query very nicely. So I guess all the questions have been very easily understood by all participants.
I hope so. If you have any other questions later, please feel free to send it across to me and I'm happy to answer. If there are more advanced questions, I'll rope in people who are actually specialists in this domain, and they can get back to you with more details if you have deeper questions. So I'm very happy to do that. Ranjana has my email ID and contact details. So if you can send any questions you have to her, and she can send it to me, and I'll be very happy to answer them, over email.
Ma'am, apart from
Ma'am,
that,
I have one question more, ma'am.
All right.
Ma'am, do we apply these algorithms directly on data warehouse, or we optimize that data in some kind of metadata or something like that to draw, ma'am, to draw conclusion from the data? Because ma'am, data is very irregular in data warehouse in a distributed system environment.
I didn't really understand your question. So data could be residing somewhere. It is already in digital format, and you're saying, let's assume the data is in a data warehouse. Now, what is the next thing you want to do with that data?
Ma'am, cleaning of data. Ma'am, do we directly apply cleaning on that data, or we transform that data into a metadata or something, something a subset of that warehouse data?
So, by the way,
To draw-
metadata, so the concept of metadata is data that defines the data in some form, right? So in a data warehouse, the metadata is a more, so there are two things. One is there is metadata, which is associated with the nature of the data. But when you talk about a data warehouse, you're talking about the metadata that defines the data. Where is it in the system? How can it be accessed? So typically in the programming context, the metadata in a data warehouse would refer to, how do you, if it is, let's say, an Oracle based data warehouse or a SQL based data warehouse, then which table is it? Where is it? How can you access it? Is it on the cloud somewhere? So that is the kind of metadata that is associated with the data, right? Then some of at a functional level, the metadata associated with the data is around what does this data define, right? So typically the headers of the table actually are the metadata for the data inside that table, right? So if the data is stored, so which aspect of this data are you talking about? But let me try and answer your data cleansing question, which is actually different from metadata. When you have to clean data, sorry, go ahead.
Ma'am, for example, you discussed earlier that in meteorology, or weather forecasting, for example, several amount of data is kept in data warehouse, and we clean that data and make a subset of that data in certain form, and then we use it for predictions and all. So when we do it after cleaning it, or we directly apply that, is it available inside a data warehouse, or we make a separate copy of replica of that data in a clean format?
No. So that question cannot be answered. It is very, very subjective. I will tell you why. You're just assuming that there is a data warehouse for some data, right? But data strategies are not worked out like this. First of all, the data is stored somewhere. Okay, let's assume it's stored somewhere. It is stored in a data warehouse. One can question, what is the kind of nature of data that you will store in a data warehouse? And why do you need a data warehouse? I think, first of all, data warehouse is a very archaic term today because of the cloud. There is a lot of on-demand data, and the tiering of the data is done at the back end. The cloud provider actually takes care of what is the nature of the data that you need very quick access to, and what is the data, and they sort of tier that data accordingly, right? But you have different forms of storage today. You may have blob storage, you may have storage which is data which needs where you need very quick access, and all of that, right? Now let's assume in your case you're saying that there is a data warehouse and you have to get some data out of that for doing some predictions. Definitely, when you are doing certain predictions, you want to examine the data. If the data needs cleaning, it needs to be cleaned. It needs to be subcategorized. Maybe a smaller portion is required because your data warehouse may contain, let's say, a lot of data, and you want to do only one specific prediction. You want to examine only, let's say, in the astronomy case, you want to only examine, let's say it is black hole data, and you want to only examine black holes of a certain size, right? Or at a certain distance, or stars at a certain distance. Then you want to actually take a subset of that data, and then you do the feed that subset into a program. Now, your question on whether you should take that small subset out and store it elsewhere is a performance decision and a cost decision. So, for example, depending on where I'm storing the data and how I expect the program to execute, I may take an architecture decision saying that this is transient data. I don't need it later. I just need it for this analysis. If that is a situation, I may not decide to store it. I may make a temporary copy of that data, which is used for the analysis, and then storage is freed up for the next analysis. On the other hand, if it is data which I'm going to be using several times, right, then I may take the architecture decision to create a subset of that data for a very specific program or purpose. So what you're describing now is an architecture decision within the program that is being created, or a solution that is being created for how you need to deal with the data. So you will have a data architect, or who will get into this conversation along with other people who may be associated with that program to take a decision on that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right.
Rima ma'am, in terms of an implementation point of view, like we are going to do, I mean, though it is not your domain, or I don't know, frankly speaking, but since we have a upcoming session for ML and AI, so do we need to have the complete knowledge of mathematical algorithms or algebra kind of things so that it will be easy for the person to get the things done, or it is not required that much? Because I am particularly talking about, I don't have the mathematical background in terms of the large this regression theory, or the algorithms, that is mathematical algorithms that is nowadays it is implemented. So my question is,
yeah, so
do we require?
So data science, machine learning, AI, they have a very strong mathematical base. So most technologies today, right? I mean, especially in this space, there has to be some, you cannot do these subjects eventually without any maths. By the way, any algorithm which is reasonably advanced in computer science has a mathematical base to it. So mathematics is a very intrinsic part of computer science. Having said that, let me just rephrase my thinking, because I tend to think from a systems perspective, and I should be giving the answer that you need. And so if you're working on creating these programs within Microsoft, you need to have a mathematical background. If you are an end user for machine learning, people like us in Microsoft, companies like Microsoft, actually we have Azure ML, we have cognitive services APIs on our cloud platform, where all the complexity is hidden behind those programs. You can, if you have normal programmers, those people can just make the right calls to the right algorithms and use them. They need not know the mathematics. So we call this process as democratizing AI, democratizing ML for people. So you have Azure ML, you have all kinds of AI algorithms which are built into the cloud, and you can just refer to them. You can give your data, train models on the cloud, and then you can use that data. So as at that level, you do not need to have the mathematical background. But if you want to develop a product which can, like for example, if you were to work in Microsoft, or you were to work in Google, or you were to work in any of these tech companies which are dealing with AI and writing AI programs, then you need a mathematical background.
Okay.
Yeah. But as an end user, you need not. Yeah. No.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Pankaj Goswami from MIT University.
Yes.
We had a good discussion on availability of data as well as the data warehouse. Nowadays, the data availability in terms of APIs. So how, if I trained a model, if I create a model, so how do we get those APIs for to generate the meaningful facts?
I didn't really understand your question, but let me try and rephrase it and see if I got the gist of what you wanted to ask.
Actually, I want
let's,
to ask it
yeah.
is concerned with the data availability. Suppose I need the data to train our model. Nowadays it is in terms of getting API to implement in our model. Okay, so how do we check the availability of the API to concern with my model, or what I am developing it? Is there any method to gather all this API?
Yeah, no, so the APIs are for the models themselves, right? You own the data. Now you want to now you want to determine which is the best API to use, right?
Yes.
That's what you're asking. So for your data, essentially, if you look at, for example, let's say your data deals with data which is pictures, right?
Okay.
So then you probably need to use, let's say, if you want to do basic manipulation of picture data and you want to train a model to that, then there is something called Microsoft has cognitive services APIs. Within there is a vision API, right? If your data is all sound, if it is all sound, right? Like speeches, or you have extracts from what people have said, and the spoken line, there's some spoken stuff that is available, or it could be sounds of different kind, or whatever it is. As long as it is sounds, then we could be like a different set of APIs which could be leveraged. And usually, all the companies that provide these services today will have enough documentation on the site itself. For example, for Azure, you will have all the documentation on the site which will guide you towards this. In fact, if that doesn't answer the question, there are people who are supposed to help you out for these processes. You can send email, ask questions, and get more insights into how you want to solve this.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Sure.
So
okay,
I think
Ranjana.
I think all the questions are handled now. In case anyone has any queries, you can share it with me. I will request ma'am to answer your question. Ma'am, thank you very much. As a token of gratitude, I would like to share a certificate, and I'll be mailing you the soft copy of that certificate to you. Thank you very much for being in this session.
No, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the certificate. Thank you for the great questions. I believe the questions help you more than any slides that I cover. And I got some really good questions today. I hope I've been able to answer, and wish you all the best for the rest of the sessions. And thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. So the next session we will have at 2:30. We can disperse for a break and join back before 2:30 so that we can manage the glitches of joining the team. Thank you all participants for these wonderful questions.
For the
Yes,
next
ma'am.
session, a new session will be published. Am I correct, Ranjana ma'am? Or the same session? Because then the two simultaneous meetings should not go. Please stop the recording.